I'm in Montreal right now. It's been a while since I've been in the city. And I was reflecting on a few elements about the nature of our awakening and energetics, our ability to transmute and alchemize, and the dynamics of big cities. Because quite a common topic, I would say, that I've shared and that many on the path of awakening tend to come into is in relation to, the desire or preference to be more in nature. For the most part, a byproduct of what happens when you come to know your true nature. So then that looks to reflect and manifest more and more when we're in nature, of course, because everything in nature is living, organic for the most part. We could say even nature is distorted on this planet on some level, though for the most part we are dealing with organic beings, trees, animals, sounds, sensations, all of the above. And so we could say that when we're in the city, there's more synthetic creations abound, and in those synthetic creations, potentially, or at least the perception would be that there's less connection to what's around us, right? It's easier to meditate just naturally, to be in nature. It just feels more at home, feels a natural peacefulness and all of this. And, in the city, maybe not so much. And at the same time, when we really start to get into more of the details of things and not generalize too much, we can tend to come into a more broadened perception, I guess you could say, or a perception that's more well-rounded, that isn't so generalized about everything. And of course, another argument about the idea of why we naturally would like to go into nature more and return to nature is because in the cities there's so much synthetic creation in form of toxicity. I already talked about the synthetic creation, but in the form of toxicity. So the EMFs, or the 5G, or the air pollution, or the, bad vibes, or all the things, right? And so now, what happens when we start to remember our alchemizing potential, our ability to alchemize reality, and to recognize the true source of our well-being, happiness, love, and joyfulness? Where does it truly come from? Well, we could say that it comes from many layers and on many dimensions. So, of course, if we're eating the GMO foods and drinking the, fluoridated water and soaking up in the chemtrails all day and, meditating beside a 5G tower or something like this, we could say that over time, yes, there's, maybe detrimental effects that we've all experienced. So that's that initial layer that we generally like to come into and take a hold of and guide ourselves in a new fashion, a new way. And then as that evolves, we come to see that, well, a lot of those things and the delusion of why we would have gone into those previously was because of our emotional fog, the stagnant emotions within us, the energies that we've held that have created this momentum of self-harm and ignorance and an unwillingness or a laziness, gluttony, a lustfulness, all of the things that naturally lead for us to make potentially, on paper, poor decisions, in regards to the engagement with these things. And so we go into the emotions. Of course, this reveals our belief structures and the thought patterns that we have that, are all intertwined. It's not necessarily one is more important than the other. It's just that saying the deeper we go, just like the farther you go into the root of the tree, that's really what, or the weed or whatever, that's what you'd really be pulling out to get some sort of long-term positive effect. And so, of course, then we go into the energetic layers and we start to connect to the nature of the principles that govern us and make up us and guide these emotions, these thoughts, these intentions. We could call these the attitudes and responsibilities, the virtues, the activation of the various currents that flow through our body, the rainbow currents, plasma currents, all of this. And so as the deeper layers of these activations unfold, we start to connect to the nature of our eternal self, right? When we're speaking to things like light body, rasha body, plasma body, spirit body, understanding the full 15-dimensional time matrix in which we are, in which we live in which we have the ability to connect directly to in different ways and different combinations. It is all us, and it's all a foundation to what gives rise to everything within this material realm. Of course, it all comes back to our direct connection to Source. So in coming back to this direct connection to Source, well, Source is all powerful, it's all being, the all oneness, the Source is eternally, it's incomprehensible how vast, infinity or eternity or whatever term you're using is. It's something that really can't even be spoken to. So when we come to connect to that, and we recognize that is actually our true nature, our true identity, and we are in this individuation co-creating with that, then in truth we have the ability to rest within the nature of this oscillating flame, the flame body, the Lazian flame, the expanded identity of our energetics, of our anatomy, that give us eternal power to alchemize, to specifically in this case, as I'm saying, be within a city and yet feel relatively unaffected by the movements of this and that and EMF and 5G and the hustle and bustle and the pollution and all of that. And what's also important to understand is that we come to a harmony and a balance within ourselves, that we're not going to overdo anything particularly. Maybe we're not going to spend, years upon years within the city. We may naturally feel called to go in many different places, often more so in nature, let's say. But we're not ruling it out. And the core is that when we're in balance, there's no real extremes with anything in particular. Because extremes often comes from a place of fear, where we're fearing one side, and then we go very extreme to the other side, and then we're fearing that side, and we go extreme to the other, and yada yada yada. There's many stories of the great monks and beings who, of course, have disappeared in the caves. I've been that in past lives. I'm sure many of you listening to this have potentially done this, or monastery life, or communities. It seems like the natural trajectory for many of us. And yet at the same time, I also know of great beings that have attained enlightenment in the middle of the busiest cities in the world. Mumbai and, I don't know, American cities and all of these things. So it's important that we remember this, and we come to a grounded nature, because the more we're in fear about things in particular, the more surely they will have effect on us. It's not that we're going to go run and jump in a pool of gasoline and think we can alchemize it. Nothing is to be taken from this and used within the mind, thinking, oh, I can just manipulate all these things, at will. That's not necessarily the case. I'm speaking to something that's more synchronistic, more in a fluidity, more in a flow. While I've been here in Montreal, and I'll show you a view in a moment, at the top of Montreal, the energy you feel from the city is so profound. It is so profound, and when you can essentially work with that energy, to commune with that energy, and to expand into it, there's a vastness that can come, that you are essentially using the very fuel that one may have feared previously, and as juice, as as sustenance, as the same one energy that we get when we're in nature, because in truth source is everywhere, and so we can connect with the source whenever and wherever we are. Naturally, of course, we're in the conversation of a full spectrum awakening. So if we're in the cities and we can't access the good quality foods, or let's say the good quality air, or 5G's pumping away, all that, well, yeah, naturally that may deteriorate things on the physical level, and we may have to balance that. But surely we understand that as we come back to our direct connection, and that direct connection that fosters all the principles of love and compassion and patience and balance, we're not going to find ourselves in situations where we're fearing this environment or that environment or this or that or all these things. We're coming to the place that makes us feel most at home, wherever that may be. Another thing that's been helpful in my path, although human design is technically a fallen system, as many will say, channeled by various beings and all of this, there is still validity to it, just like in astrology. I mean, astrology is technically a fallen system, but it still has a usefulness in the sense that we are navigating within a fallen system, so we navigate accordingly. Back to the point about human design. There is an element in the PHS, personal health system, where we can determine what our natural environment is. Meaning, what environment makes us feel most at home. For me, it's narrow valleys, so the more I'm actually in the core of the valley, which often is a city or a town or a place of gathering, that there's more hustle and bustle, more direct cognition of sound that comes direct in the ears. This can be recreated through headphones as well, or I even experience it in direct messages or one-to-one conversations. It doesn't have to be in an actual physical environment. But nonetheless, understanding your environment, whatever that is, may be helpful. And even beyond human design, if we're getting into things like astrocartography in the astrological system, then, well, that can also be helpful. So it's very different for each of us, and naturally, if we're called into nature, as we all generally will be, especially as cities start to kind of fumble a little bit, well, we can see that through. We don't have to resist it. And at the same time, as we come to cities, we can enjoy them, and we can naturally understand that there will be much service required in these cities just by us being there. If things get a little rocky, by us supporting in many physical ways, and recognizing that the entire world is not just going to collapse overnight, and it's not necessarily going to collapse, it's just simply in a restructuring, and these cities, as I will show you now, are in a restructuring. Look at that. So I meditated here earlier for quite a while, and you just can feel the potency and energy. Not necessarily a place I'd be living for any extended period of time, but certainly endless opportunities everywhere we go to remember ourselves and to utilize the energies that are created in whatever way, to continue to expand, to learn, to know, to become ourselves again. Drop the labels and the dogmas of the many things that we may have come to learn, have perceptions about, opinions, etc. we are, the power in which we have to navigate all realities. Because I'm sure we've been in much worse realities than the ones we're perceiving now in various other lifetimes, and we surely made it out, made it through, transformed. So important we remember this wherever we are, and just be wherever we are. This isn't really a video about justifying why we're here, why we're there, why we should be here, why we're there. It's more so a call for us to simply be where we are, and to recognize there's no limitations anywhere we are. We are free wherever we are, and we can remember this. And in that, naturally, we'll be guided to wherever else we'd like to venture to and navigate and explore. And so be it.